Thank you for joining Salon and this amazing talk with Lena Chen and Maggie Oates, the creators of OnlyBans. My name is Gabriela Garcia. I use she, her pronouns. I am currently living on unceded Munsee Lenape territory, known today as Woodstock, New York. I am a co-founder of Decoding Stigma, a thinking group bridging the gap between sex workers, academics, and technologists, with the goal of prioritizing sexual autonomy as a necessary ethics questions for all those who purport to be designing the future. I'd like to thank my amazing co-founder, Livia Foltz, who's in the background, for organizing this event, and the Design and Technology Program, and Ayo and Sven, who are here tonight, at Parsons, for giving us the opportunity to co-host this conversation. For those who don't know, OnlyFans is a subscription-based content creation platform initially popularized by adult content creators and sex workers who use the site to directly interact with and sell their content to fans online. Recently, OnlyFans has been in the news for its decision to ban adult content after a major banking corporation threatened to pull support. OnlyFans quickly backtracked on that decision due to a major outcry by adult content creators and their fans, who cited the fact that the platform was effectively tossing sex workers to the curb after they had garnered millions in both dollars and users for the site. This, however, is just the latest in a long history of criticism of OnlyFans by sex workers who have asserted that the site has exploited their labor while subjecting them to discriminatory content moderation, payment withholding, and abysmal privacy protections. Lena Chen and Maggie Oates responded to these very issues with the creation of OnlyBans, an interactive game that critically examines the policing of marginalized bodies and sexual labor to empathetically teach people about discrimination faced by sex workers online. And thankfully, we have these two amazing creators with us to talk about the work tonight. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers. Lena Chen is a Chinese-American writer and artist creating performances and socially engaged art in live and virtual contexts. Her practice has been informed by her experiences as one of the earliest documented survivors of revenge porn and her work in the sex industry as a stripper, a camp performer, and fetish provider. She earned a BA in sociology from Harvard University and is an MFA candidate at Carnegie Mellon University School of Art. The most legible title for Maggie Oates is a creative technologist, which you should own it. On odd days, she's a caregiver, a privacy nerd, a performer, an aspiring transformative justice practitioner, and artist. Her academic and personal research focuses on the intersection of privacy and the arts, particularly on how artists and institutions under, mislovingly use digital data. She is based indefinitely in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I want to invite the audience to submit questions for Lena and Maggie over the course of the conversation in the Q&A. We'll be opening up discussion at the end. But I now hand over the reins to Lena and Maggie. Thank you.
Hello. Lena's starting out strong by being muted while she's talking.
I just want to say thank you for the introduction, Gabby. And yes, I'm muted. I'm less technologically confident than my lovely collaborator here. But we're very pleased to be here and to share this work with you.
Yeah, so a quick run through of what's up today. We're going to show you a little bit of the beginning of the game and then switch to showing some in-process photos, talk about some of the design challenges and like thoughts that we've had along the way, and then excited mostly for questions. So I will let Lena start us off by playing the first week of the game, as one would.
Yes, please click play. So we have to select a name, and I'm gonna go with Poor Art Student. That would be a fake name. So, poor art student, you're hoping to earn $200 to pay your gas and water bills in 6 weeks. Every fan you get earns you $10, and if you're lucky, some of them might even tip you extra. Let's get fans.
I would also like to point out that you didn't read the kissy face emoji. Don't forget. Oh yeah, it's important. Yes.
I'll do the sound effect instead.
Yeah.
So week 1, you have $1 in your pocket and $199 to go. You get out the selfie stick and start snapping away. I'm going to ask for some audience interaction here. Which photo do you guys want to post today? You can just use numbers. Okay, Lila says 1. Let's go with photo number 1. Okay, your photo got some attention and attracted 2 fans. Yay, you're getting the hang of this. What else could you do to boost your fan count? Hey, poor art student, cool account. I'm also selling pics on OnlyFans. Do you want to do a share for share? What's a share for share? I'll share your content with my followers if you do the same for me. It's a way to build a bigger fan base. So I'm going to go with sure, let's share. They share your pics to their feed and you attract 2 new fans and make some more money. Your wallet is now at $41. Let's continue to our next week. Let's do one more week. So week 2, you have $41 in your pocket and $159 to go. You get out the selfie stick and start snapping away. Okay guys, which photo do you want to share this time? I saw, okay, the first person I think was Jazeline, who says 5. So let's go with the one in the center. Your photo got some attention and attracted 6 new fans. Yay, you're getting the hang of this. What else could you do to boost your fan count? Scrolling through your message history with your ex, you find a pic you sent when you 2 were sexting. The relationship might be over, but the relics don't have to go to waste. You repurpose the photo by sharing it with your followers. And now you've got a piece of fan mail, which we should open. Take it all off, says your fan, with a $41 tip. You've earned a tip and the wallet's now at $142. Wow, the week is already over. Time flies when you're getting tips. Okay, we're gonna do one more week because actually we've had a really good game so far and I want to experience what happens when things don't go as planned. So we have 142 in the pocket and 58 to go. But weird, the button to post photos is now disabled. You check your notifications. Locked. We temporarily limited some of your account features. In order to make sure OnlyFans is as safe as possible, you may be asked to confirm you're not a robot. Easy, right? For full access, please verify your phone number. So, we submit our number, and the account is still locked. Thank you for verifying your phone number, but for somewhat vague security reasons, we still need more info before you can cash out any money from your account. So we're gonna have to add our legal name, add a personal email, and upload a photo of ourselves holding our state ID. Let's submit and see. Verified. Finally, you're not thrilled about all the personal info you just gave away, but at least now you can get back to posting. Okay, which photo do we want to post now? Skylar says 3, so let's do photo number 3. Shadow banned. Your photo is posted, but there are barely any likes or comments. A shadow ban means that a user can continue posting as normal, but their posts will be hidden from the rest of the community. Sorry, no new fans and no new money. But ugh, why? You can get shadow banned for following other sex workers. 73% of sex workers have experienced social media platforms suppressing their friends' content from their timelines. And this particular image comes from a contributor who says, I'm a gay, non binary Latinx sex worker. I've been working for 9 years and have been flagged so many times I can't keep count. My personal account of 10 years was taken away from me, says Quinn. Ugh, sex work is harder than you thought. It's time to brush up on your business skills. You get a DM from a sex worker you follow. Hi, poor art student. I'm a cam performer and think your pics are awesome. Aw, thanks. Do you want to join a private group chat with some other sex workers? Maybe. What do you talk about? All kinds of things. How to make more money, keep ourselves safe, and avoid getting banned. I think that sounds like exactly what I need. I'd love to join. Sure. Just click this invite link. Welcome to the group, poor art student. We were just talking about how to disable location sharing when taking photos. What does that mean? A photo's EXIF data can expose the exact location of where you took a photo. So if you're shooting pics at home, people can find out where you live. Wow, that's creepy. I'll definitely be careful with that. Let's chat some more. You set up some collaborations in the group that eventually lead to 2 new fans. Your wallet is now at $162. Now you can stop chatting and continue to your next week. I think this is a great place to stop because y'all have gotten a substantial preview of the game thus far. And Maggie and I can talk a little bit about how we developed this concept and some of the ways in which we were also inspired by both the aesthetics of various sex worker artists who have been an influence on us, as well as some game designers as well.
So I believe Gabrielle actually read this little blurb out loud, so I won't read it again at the intro. But some things you should know about Only Bands. It's a game, as you've seen, created by sex workers with a few token allies sprinkled in there. And it focuses on policing of bodies and labor in the digital sphere. And so particularly how that relates to surveillance, censorship, and discrimination. So some of the things you might run into in this game are content moderation, shadow banning, as we already saw in this a little preview. You can run into real name policies, facial recognition, lots of other threats as you play someone who's trying to make the money to get through their life in their month. And as you saw, the game also features images and stories from real sex workers who had actual images that were banned, censored, etc. on different real platforms. So I guess we saw some of the vibe, but here's some more of the vibe. This is a vibe. The game is also set up that it can become an installation. One way to play it is in a room that is sort of like the setting of a camp performer's room. This is a photo of an installation from Science Gallery Detroit, where incidentally, they refused to let us put things like condoms and sex toys in the room. That's a whole other story for another day, but you at least get the sense of what the goal was with these. And I know that we're the first in a series that Decoding Stigma is helping put together. So I think it might be useful to start with some sex work 101. Because not everyone in the audience might know this. I know a lot of you will and might have like slightly different take on what we're covering here. So feel free to like chime in the chat or jot on your questions so we can cover it with everyone later if you object to anything as we're presenting it here. So I will also skip through a lot of this, and if people want to learn more in the Q&A, we can loop back to it at the end. But just first of all, some terminology. Sex worker, sex work, erotic labor are on average the preferred umbrella terms for this kind of work right now. Prostitution is a legal term. Most people, but some do, don't use it to apply to themselves. There's lots of different types of sex work, depending on who you ask, what falls under this umbrella, but it definitely varies from stripping to porn, camming, fetish services, being a sexual surrogate for people with disabilities. And there's also more commonly known terminology like pimps, johns, and beards. These are all things in the sex work arena. And something that is important to cover when you're talking about sex work that people often want to know who are not in this world are like, why do people do this? Why would you ever do this? There's a lot of reasons, none of which deserve to be questioned, but some of the reasons people do that are ones we'll cover soon. But here are some quotes from a few sex workers that I think, again, I'll just loop back around if people want to hear from them. But in summary, there's a variety of reasons why people do sex work. One of them is that the work can be quite flexible. Often economic reasons, needing the money, like in the game. They feel like they have no other job options. They're interested in the work and want to do it. It can be particularly helpful, for example, if you have a chronic disability or chronic pain because of that work flexibility and stuff like that. We also know that from the small amount of like census, thank you, Jesus, Freudian slip or something. Census style data about sex work, like marginalized communities tend to be overrepresented. Queer people, trans people, people of color, indigenous people particularly, and those groups are also more likely to work in the more dangerous forms of sex work. A lot of people don't work under the brothel model that you might be familiar with in movies. And also not everyone works in OnlyFans style. Some people do explicitly offline work as well. And lastly, it can be hard to leave this business for a variety of reasons, largely stigma, I think, being the primary one. So we can talk more about all that later. But it felt important to get at least a little bit of solid ground for people who aren't familiar with sex work. Lena, do you want to take over for a little bit and talk through how online sex work plays out in the game?
Yes. So OnlyFans is particularly interested in what happens when sex workers try to attract clients online, sell content online, basically represent themselves as sex workers online, and how this butts up against a lot of content moderation policies, especially in the last few years following the 2018 passage of the bill FOSTA SESTA. Next slide. And part of our process of creating the game involved speaking to community members, to peers, to our friends, as well as sourcing stories through an open call that encompassed a lot of people who came to the sex industry from different experiences. So some folks are, primarily porn performers. They use Instagram, for example, to promote films that they're in, to maybe make collaborations with other film performers. Other people maybe are not necessarily even interested in selling content online, but want to find clients specifically for in-person sessions that they would then get paid for. And I think it's important to note that a lot of people that were our contributors were not just sex workers, but also artists, also activists and community organizers. And these are groups that have also faced a lot of censorship in recent years. And many people have had experiences where posts that are very political, perhaps, a hashtag that references Black Lives Matter, for example, also gets taken down. So we learned through their testimonies and through the research conducted by organizations like Hacking Hustling that there's a lot of intersections and experiences of censorship, and that people who come from marginalized identities also tend to be the ones who are dealing with more discrimination on these platforms. So this is just a stat we took from Hacking Hustling. There was a particular study called Posting into the Void that informed a lot of the narrative that makes up OnlyFans. And one of our goals was to find a way to share this information in a manner that didn't feel super didactic, but rather empathetic. And that was why it was really important to marry the research along with the personal stories. And now I'll go a little bit into how we designed the vibe, the aesthetics of the game, because we thought it was really important that we take this topic seriously, but also that it's a fun experience for people to play and encounter. So we wanted to go with a kind of like vaporwave color scheme, and one of our biggest inspirations was exotic cancer, which illustrates a lot of common experiences in sex work in a realistic and sometimes grotesque ways. And this was like one of the earliest design influences. We also put out the open call and decided that in order to create a kind of aesthetic uniformity between all the different images that were submitted to us, that we would stylize them in a certain way in that photo grid that you saw in the game. And our graphic designer, Goofy Tooth, did an incredible job of drawing up some mood boards. These are some examples very early on from our process. And another really big factor was our experience playing Cops and Rubbers, which is a social impact game that can be experienced online or on tabletop. It was designed by Lian Tran, and it was specifically about the experience of sex workers who found themselves criminalized for possessing condoms, considered in many cases to be instruments of crime and proof of participating in illegal sex work. And this is an issue all around the world, including in Pittsburgh, where Maggie and I are currently based. And a lot of sex worker advocacy groups have, worked to reverse this policy. And we thought this was a great and meaningful example of how you can use games in order to educate people about the experiences of sex workers and how that intersects with really harmful policing models. As part of the first iteration of the game, we were residents at Kelly Strayhorn Theater in Pittsburgh, and that's where we shot a lot of the videography that you see as part of the work. And now we're in the process of seeking funding to release a final version that would include videography with more models, including a more diverse array of body types. Yeah.
I can talk a little bit about some of the gamey designy part of this. One thing fun about making a game is that none of us have experience making a game, but it turns out you don't need to like be a game designer to make a game. You just do it sometimes, and then a game appears. So to start off with, I just want to show like the real reality of in-process work. Here's the first iteration of trying to figure out how to make a branching storyline, a narrative line. As you can see, I made this, not the graphic designer. And that evolved into, I believe this is almost the current game map in terms of like understanding the branching of the game narrative and how it plays through. So I'm guessing this is a little hard to see if you're on a smaller device, but on the left side, you go through the beginning of your week, selecting a photo. The photo has an outcome. And then it was really important to Lena and to me, and it ended up being everyone involved, that like we highlight the importance of community to sex workers, particularly to online sex workers, but this is also true for offline workers often, that it's hard to survive if you don't have help and community. And so that is something really beautiful and powerful and strong about the sex work community that we really wanted to make sure came into the game. Someone just asked in the chat, how did you make this game app? That's an excellent segue to talking about the tech side of stuff. So this is a text-based game. The only thing you need to play it is literacy in English and something that can select a link, which is great because it's really easy to develop, really easy to prototype, and also relatively accessibility friendly from the outset. So this is written in Twine Sugar Cube. So that's basically HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and some jQuery. And it's an open source package. It's really lovely. I highly recommend it if you like want to make something, but you're not sure where to start. It's very beginner friendly compared to a lot of coding things I've encountered. Some challenges that we faced along the way are that between version 1 and version 2, I completely rewrote the game in a different syntax to make sure that we could include things like our video and audio effectively and more complex logic as well. So that was fun. Controlling background audio on the web is challenging always. So for example, something challenging about audio, Chrome very helpfully thinks that most audio on the web is spam, which is true, you know, like most things, an ad pops up and it autoplays the video. So in Chrome, you cannot autoplay sound in most cases. So for example, fixing things like that, working through challenges like that is something on the disadvantage to web-based games where you don't have very much control over the browser environment. Collaboration on Twine is difficult. It's very beginner friendly, not very team friendly. And in general, a challenge with I didn't know what I was doing, and there was a fucking pandemic. But for the next iteration on the technical side, I would really love to keep improving our accessibility. So for example, having the ability to turn off videos, which can be very disorienting or sensory overload to some people. For example, making sure that the whole game is screen reader compatible start to finish, things like that. Some of the design challenges or tensions that we spent some time working through were, I mean, I think everyone feels this. There's too much content for a short game. Like Hacking Hustling wrote like a 30-page report, and we have a 10-minute game that is also supposed to be hopefully entertaining. Avoiding re-traumatizing or appropriating work of other sex workers. Even I will say, I think Goofy would be fine if I mentioned that Goofy Toof is our designer, and I remember a few times she was playing through iterations of the game and got banned, and she said she could, like, you know, feel the feeling of getting banned and how anxiety inducing it is for her. And so even like this level like can evoke a lot of emotion for people who have like had to face censorship. As well as a design challenge of we knew we really wanted to incorporate a diversity of real sex workers and also have a single player, not lose nuance, maintain the aesthetic cohesion. So for example, one thing we spent a long time thinking about was like literally how do we use these photos respectfully in like a way that's true to the people, that doesn't erase race, that doesn't erase body shape, but also makes sense diegetically. And as well, a design challenge is that there was a fucking pandemic. So just quickly, I'm going to say out loud the names of all these wonderful people, and then we can start perhaps some questions unless Lena wants to add anything in. This game is Lena's brainchild. I wrote the tech. Goofy Toof is our videographer and graphic designer. They are excellent. Our sound designer, Adrian Castle, would love to design sound for you. All of this, the vast majority of this research is from Hacking Hustling, as well as many more sort of more academic sources that I'm sure Lena would be happy to talk about if you have questions. We've got financial support from Polis, 180, Kelly Strayhorn, UC Berkeley, Carnegie Mellon, and Science Gallery Detroit. And then the image contributors, so the people who have real photos in the game include Amala, Faye Bright, Hellbait, JP, Link, Quinn, Karen, Namina, and Stoner Donnie, who all have excellent content online. So if you click the credits section, you can find links to all of their great stuff. Lena, is there anything you want to add before we get around to talking with everyone in the group?
I think that's it. Thanks. I also think Adrian is a MFA student at Parsons. So shout out to Adrian, our sound designer.
My God, thank y'all so much for that awesome presentation and being able to dig into the research and design of it all, as well as the messaging and the importance of communicating these very important topics to new audiences was so great. And so I kind of want to start with something that I think is an important question, especially given the audience, which I'm sure a lot of people that are trying to design technology and other interactive media experiences and hoping to engage with some serious world issues. So OnlyFans is such an awesome example of radical collaboration. You have peer-led research from Hacking Hustling, you have you're archiving real world experiences of digital sex workers, and you have the support of allies in developing, designing, and fiscally supporting the actual game. So can you tell us not just about the cross-pollination, but how folks can become more mindfully involved in the communities that they're hoping to create with as tech-savvy allies? That's for either one of you who wants to answer that.
I mean, it's a hard question because I feel like this game happened in a really organic way. I moved to Pittsburgh to do my MFA at Carnegie Mellon in the fall of 2019, and actually Maggie and I, the first time we ever encountered each other, we didn't know who the other person was. She was the research lead in an immersive theater production called Project Amelia that delved into a lot of privacy and AI issues. And I went to like a beta test, run of that piece. And we didn't encounter each other until later on when a mutual friend who started the Pittsburgh chapter of SWAP, Sex Workers Outreach Project, connected us. That person was Jesse Sage. And so in the initial days of our friendship, I would say that we had this mutual political interest. We were both graduate students at Carnegie Mellon. And that's, something that I think is very emblematic of a lot of the ways in which I've collaborated with folks in the past, that the relationship actually begins from some kind of shared interest and, just like liking each other. And part of the reason why OnlyFans has been such a dream to work on is because, I'm doing it with my friends. Like I'm doing it with people who I want to hang out with anyways, who care about the same things I care about. And it doesn't feel like work, although obviously it is, and the labor is important and should be compensated. So I know that's not really like an answer, but I will say another thing that I really appreciate is that, I have certain ideas, visions that I want to realize. And as someone who considers themselves to be an artist, but honestly lacks a lot of technical skills, a lot of manual skills, I find myself working with a lot of other folks in order to realize those visions. And I think there's something really beautiful about sharing a vision together and finding a way to make it happen. It's kind of like co-parenting, but co-parenting like an idea. So, yeah.
I will say, I echo something Lena said about you phrased it as like collaborating with friends, people you actually want to spend time with. And I think it also, like a year ago, I read Adrienne Marie Brown's Pleasure Activism, and that coinciding with the pandemic made me realize I don't want to do collaborations that don't feel good anymore. Like there's so much work that could be done that I could do. Like, why would I spend it doing in collaborations that feel painful? So that's been like really like guiding light for the recent year and a half. And I will say, as tech savvy ally, as your question was targeted at, how to collaborate better with people in different communities, I feel like is just really starts with relationship building. And this is obvious always, but like you can't do something with people you don't know and who don't trust you. Like do that first. I was introduced to Lena because of like I've been working with the local sex worker advocacy group for several years and like was there as a resource doing what was asked of me, from like making a spreadsheet or like helping organize an action, and like something came up that was tech, and I was like, oh, I can do this too. And it was really a result of like having relationships with people that enabled this. I'll also say paying people is great too, in terms of like, I think I'm always like trying to poke our team to like do a pretty good job tracking our funds so that we know how much of our money is spent paying other sex workers. And it's a very substantial fraction of the money, which feels really good.
Yeah, being involved with community is such a different narrative than what you get with most technology that's designed around sex work, which tends to be, quite exploitative. You have things like Spank Chain, which is just once again, tech bros kind of exploiting this narrative of like needing to transfer money anonymously, but they're getting major profits without any sort of input or say with sex workers. So it's really cool to get more of the conversation of how these collaborations can happen in a space that really starts with connection and involvement and community involvement, and something I think is incredibly important for design schools to engage with and kind of put in their curriculum. So before going into more esoteric questions, just staying more on the tech side of things, well, I guess it is a little esoteric. So how does game design make research more accessible? And what were some of the key decisions in how to weave the research into the gameplay and narrative?
I can speak to one big change that happened between version 1 of the game in the spring and the version we just released this month. And that was incorporating the use of sex worker peers and mentors that guide you in the game. So you have all these opportunities to chat with the other sex workers and to learn from them. In the earlier version of the game, these facts that you learned were kind of just like spit at you and it wasn't something that you obtained through an interactive conversation. And I think that was an element where we decided we want this to mimic more what an actual interaction on social media might feel like. And so people also can experience firsthand, like, this is what it's like to have your community look out for you, rather than, oh, they took this handy stat about digital security and now they're feeding it to me, so I have the information.
Yeah, you actually did a lot of user feedback between the iterations, and you're still welcoming feedback. Can you tell the audience about what that process is like and how it is to sort of have iterations that are kind of constantly in beta?
I personally say I think it's a gift to have things constantly in beta and not be forced to be like, it's done. Probably we should call it done at some point, but for now, it's really a gift to like really slow burn a project for 2 years of iteration and like just put out a version every 6 months when we have time and money and energy to do that. And some of the ways that we solicited feedback are, well, one of the interest in doing an open call was to make sure like this was a thing people were interested in the sex work community outside of our bubble. And like we got a huge number of responses. So that was like a clear, yes, we have a lot to say about this topic. So I think even the open call was like a first form of feedback of like, does this sound interesting to you? And that was a resounding yes. Another form of feedback was the very early iterations have just been played by a lot of people, game design people, like art faculty, moms, as well as sex workers, and several of the contributors have now like played through the game live, sort of like what Lena was doing through, which actually ends up being a really useful form of feedback. Watching someone else play, like cognitive walkthrough if you're in design world, but the live stream has been really helpful also for gathering anecdotes. So for example, in a live stream recently, one of the contributors like got to one of the pages that has like security tips sort of along the lines of the location data you saw. And she, like, a very well-established sex worker was like, what is that? Like, oh shit, I didn't know this. Like, I should learn when location data can be embedded in my photos. That's bad. So it's really, it's been interesting to see that live streaming is actually a feedback mechanism in a way through that observation.
Yeah. I think we've also gotten some really good examples of like what is a good use for the game, and some of our contributors have also showed the game to their friends or their family, and it's a way for them to easily have folks understand their working conditions, the stigma involved, without them having to perform the emotional labor of going into all those details. And so I think one of the things that we would really be interested in the future in terms of getting good feedback is how would this game be received by a policymaker with the power to alter FOSTA SESTA, or a tech worker who is working at Instagram, Facebook, and so forth?
It's really, it's genius how this experience really serves a number of audiences, whether it be educating digital content creators on like modalities of digital hygiene, or just trying to get the regular person whose only view of sex work is what they read about it on, I don't know, the Daily Post, which is an awful place to get your stories about sex work. It really does have such a breadth. So with that, you've had the opportunity. Well, first, I want to take a pause back. We have about 10 more minutes. So if there are any audience questions, can you please post them in the chat now? Or I will keep going because I could talk about this all day, and Maggie and Lena are brilliant to speak with.
I do want to circle back really quickly to the question about condoms being used as, in Pittsburgh, instruments of crime in arresting and prosecuting people for sex work. Because I think there are a lot of parallels between the policing that happens, let's say, in public space on the street, and the type of policing that happens in our digital spaces. Often the reasoning given is that we need law enforcement. It's for sex workers' own good that we rescue them. We have to protect the children from seeing something that we don't want them to see, that they're not ready to see. We have to protect people who are victims of revenge porn and so forth, underage users, etc. And what actually happens when you look at the ramifications of a policy like FOSTA SESTA is that in many cases it drives sex trafficking underground. It's actually made it more difficult for law enforcement to get the information that they need. A lot of the sites and the platforms that hosted advertisements from sex workers are no longer operational. It means that sex workers who are particularly marginalized, particularly at risk during a time like the pandemic, are taking greater risks, potentially taking on more dangerous clients and working in more dangerous conditions because they don't have those outlets for advertising for their services, for reaching out to peers to learn if a particular client is dangerous or not. They don't have the same access to community resources that they had before. And I consider myself to be in a pretty privileged position. And I have a lot of friends who've done very well in the sex industry. And even for us, the threat of account deletion and of losing access to our entire community and our client base, that is an ever-present threat. And that's for the people who are the most privileged, right? So I think that when looking at the way censorship and some of these other content moderation techniques happen, we can't think about it as something that simply happens like online on the internet. It's a continuation of ways in which sex worker communities, especially the most marginalized community members, have engaged with policing all their lives. And so, people don't think about those parallels. And we also don't realize that even if you're not in sex work, I mean, ultimately, what's happening with the internet is a process of gentrification that is going to eventually affect how we all experience the web and we all use these tools. And any of these tools can be turned around and used against us, regardless of how privileged we think we are. So.
Yes, I second Jaslyn. Thank you for circling back and tying this into the importance and the connection of the digital and physical spaces. And, I think we see that collapsing more and more. So going back to a question from Sybil, this connects to, Maggie's idea of like, what about a policymaker? Who do you imagine as potential future users of this game beyond sex workers, allies, and those who come to artist spaces? Do you envision this being an educational tool more broadly? And if so, how are you thinking about reaching those audiences?
Lena, you should take that. Lena has plans, everybody. First thing you should know about Lena, Lena always has plans.
I mean, first of all, I want to give props to the person who asked the question, Sybil, who is part of an amazing sex worker collective called Veil Machine, that put on an event called Eviction as part of an I-Beam residency, and really illustrate in a performative way what does it mean to watch the disappearance of these sex positive spaces on the internet. I think there's so much potential for art to illuminate various social issues, and to destigmatize sex work in particular. I would love for the game to exist in various ways for various audiences. I think our primary audience to whom we feel accountable is, of course, other sex workers. We want them to feel good about this. We want them to innovate with how they want to use the game. And it's always tricky to bring something like this into an institutional art space because you don't want these stories to be appropriated. You don't want, an institution to just be like, we check the diversity checkbox now and we feel good about ourselves without there actually being a social impact as a result, right? And it's hard to measure that. And all of these changes that we're hoping for, like if they happen, will only happen incrementally and will only happen through allying with other groups. I think that's why the work that Decoding Stigma and Hacking Hustling do is so important, because it's not just about sex workers working in isolation, right? But making those bridges and connections to folks in the world of tech or the folks in the world of policy who have similar concerns, and are willing to listen and learn from the experiences of people who have experienced firsthand the consequences of harmful policies like FOSTA SESTA. I would say in my dream world, I would be able to take OnlyFans with a group of sex workers into like Google's offices, Facebook's offices, and like march in there in pleasers and demand a seat at the table, because these policies should not be made without input from the people who are most impacted by them. And I think that, now is also a time when folks are more willing to listen, and when the balance of power is shifting, especially with all of the uproar over OnlyFans and payment processors that have pulled their support from various sites, both OnlyFans and Pornhub, from the uproar over the various ethically murky business tactics of big tech. This is a moment when this conversation, I think, actually can happen. And when sex workers who have been ignored for so long can expect a welcome audience for their work.
Can I add one thing also about, I think there's something interesting about the medium of game and online games specifically. Like, for example, this game is posted on itch.io, which is like where a lot of indie self-published games go. And after I posted it there, the number of hits we got on the game was ridiculous. And I realized it's because it's people, I'm going to assume probably wrongfully, mostly like teenage boys looking for games about sex. And there's so many, there's actually a comment on one of our pages that was like, you tease, this game is not sexy. And I was like, wow, I feel like we just got 1,000 horny people to learn about sex work from the other side, which was like a totally unintended effect. But yeah, I think there is something to be said about the medium of a game opening the door more than like the people or the topic could by itself.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end this conversation than those two amazing observations and dreams about the future. So I just want to invite Lena and Maggie to tell us where we can find their stuff, any upcoming news. We will repost the links in the chat as well. So take it away.
I think the best way to follow the work is just sign up for our newsletter. I will drop that link there in our social media. I believe our next big mission is to come out with a fully web accessible version 3 of the game, finish our new videography, and collect some video testimonies from our contributors. Because right now, you get the text version of their stories, you get their images, but you don't get their voices yet. So that's the next goal. And we will be doing another in-person exhibition in Pittsburgh in March of 2022, at which point we have to have version 3 ready. And I hope that effort also can involve groups like Decoding Stigma, Hacking Hustling, as well as our local chapter of Sex Workers Outreach Project, so that we can really incorporate some of the folks who have been, allies in our research and in our work for the past few years. And yeah, give another platform for representing these stories and take over an institution that I don't think is used to housing a work like this.
I'll also add, I'm part of a group that's working on a slow burn coalition to decriminalize sex work in Pennsylvania. So if you want to be involved or know someone that would like to, please hit us up. There are emails on the website. We need friends all over the state, all over the Mid-Atlantic, in rural towns and big cities. All of us need to come together at some point to make that happen.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to co-host this event. Once again, I am Gabriella from Decoding Stigma. You can follow us at Decoding Stigma wherever. And I believe we have a second event, a Cloud Salon lined up. Is that confirmed? I don't want to make any promises, but would like to share that news if that's true.
Yes, confirmed.
Yes. Okay. So next one will be November 2nd with Veil Machine. So you got a little taste of a Veil Machine interaction in the questions earlier. So please come and join us in just about a month. Awkward end.
As we're all dropping off, thank you so much, Gabriella, for moderating, and Maggie, oh my gosh, so great to learn about your process and your work, and